Hello and welcome back to Bombshells. I'm Fleur Elizabeth.
And I'm Amy Jemima.
And we are joined by such a special guest.
Coming back for the second time.
The second time he couldn't stay away. He came all the way from across the pond. It's Steven Edginton!
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Why do you look scared? Again.
I don't know what you're going to ask.
I know. No, it won't be as bad as last time.
Okay.
I promise.
It'll be worse.
It wasn't that bad.
No. That was funny. So when we had Steven on last time, that was our pilot episode. Like, if you have watched that, you'll notice that we were not in the studio.
Not in this studio and not as professional as we are today.
We're now extremely professional, Steven. Hopefully you'll notice a difference. And
we're wearing the same outfits, apparently.
She's wearing the same top.
Wearing the same top.
Because it makes her think of you. And when you've been in America, she's been sleeping with it under her pillow.
Oh, wow.
I haven't washed it since that day. But anyway.
Kind of creepy vibes.
Sorry.
On the second episode.
That's why you sat so far away from us. Anyway.
Have you looked forward to coming back?
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to see my friends. And I suppose...
And here we are.
Well, and there's, England, UK, very different to the US in many ways. Many things that I miss. I just came from the pub eating a big fish and chips and a sticky toffee pudding because I thought I'm not going to have access to this for a while.
Yeah.
Fill your boots while you can.
Exactly. But in America, I mean, the food's pretty good, but it's very, fattening.
Yeah. Both of my parents said they didn't struggle with their weight until they went to America because my mum said, this is a small pizza.
Yeah, I put on some weight when I got there.
But you've been in the gym.
But I've been working out a bit, trying to burn the fat off. Yeah, my mum actually sent me some trousers because I'd actually wasn't able to fit into old suit trousers.
Stephen
Do they not sell trousers in America?
Stephen only wears one pair of trousers, which is a specific model of trouser, so he needs to be sent that specific trouser.
True?
Well, if you have a suit trousers that match with the suit jacket, you have to get the same trouser.
Yeah.
So my mum sent me out bigger trousers because I actually put on more weight.
Lovely.
But I think I've lost the weight a little bit.
I like to imagine Stephen getting changed like a sim in the morning, same clothes,
like
but he sort of spins around and he gets a new pair of the same.
I've never
style.
played that. Is that a game? Yeah.
Yeah, you know how the Simpsons, they wear the same clothes every day?
But they still put them on.
I feel like I've got so few clothes that I could be like a Simpson. I don't. These trousers are years old. They don't barely even fit me.
And now you're living in America, so we are practically
I find that there's people that I know that are, it's time to butter them up, sort of intelligent and successful, hardworking people. They feel like making decisions on clothes and stuff is a waste of time. And just have the same repeat few versions of the same thing, and then I can focus on bigger things.
Yeah,
which you have
Mark
been
Zuckerberg
doing.
Does.
Well, I just don't find clothes interesting at all. But I should.
Exactly.
I know. It's actually one of the things I wish I should improve on in my life is being better at dressing clothes.
I disagree.
Well, you dress fine, but we're here to help.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate
We'll
it.
be was it Trini and Susanna?
Yeah, Trini and Susanna.
That'll be us.
Yeah.
So I find the whole thing nightmarish. I don't want to even think about it. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Been very busy over there?
Pretty busy, yeah. Working for GB News. I think in the first podcast, the pilot episode, I was sort of in between jobs. But yeah, I've started my new role with GB News America, or GBN America. That's the official title. I'm the US correspondent, so we've been doing some filming, some interviews, and some documentaries, and covering the election. Is obviously a very important moment in America right now, ahead of November. I mean, in the last week, it's been pretty crazy. So yeah it's an interesting time to be out there.
Well, other than this week, because it's been so mental, has it been feeding your journalistic soul, or has it been quite dry?
I think it's been feeding my soul, if that's a good way of putting it. I think American politics is fascinating to me. I know that some conservatives in the UK probably rightly say that we focus too much on America and not enough on Europe, for example, or France or Germany and so But I'm annoyingly joining the cliche of Brits who go out there and find American politics interesting. I hope that I can provide a different perspective than like a lot of the British journalists who are out there. Perhaps the other American or US correspondents for the other broadcasters. I hope that what I can provide is, hopefully I'm coming at it from a slightly different place than, say, Sky News or the BBC, for example. And I do think there's a bit of a kind of racket out there in DC. I mean, I went to like one event. I think I can say this. I went to one event which was the British Embassy invited me to, with David Cameron and Anthony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State in the US. And the embassy, literally within like a few days of me moving there, the embassy got in contact and said, you should come to this event, a press conference. And I said, brilliant, absolutely, I want to ask a question. And I can't remember what I was going to ask, but I had some sort of question about Ukraine or something, maybe more skeptical funding for Ukraine, which none of the other journalists would have asked. And I get there and it's like waiting around with all these people on laptops looking very important, and, it's all their little club, they're sort of talking to each other or whatever. And then when it comes to the point of the press conference where journalists are told, this is your opportunity to ask questions, there isn't an opportunity to ask questions. There's a man who's standing behind David Cameron, sort of a State Department employee, and he reads from a card, and it's like, okay, so now Sky News, ITV, CNN, and like Financial Times, right? And then everyone goes. So those are the people who are allowed to ask questions. And I went up to the organisers afterwards, the people who'd organised the event, and I said, how am I meant to ask a question?
Yeah.
That, you didn't even give me the opportunity, or you didn't even explain to me how this whole process worked.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even tell me. And then I emailed them, and then they still wouldn't tell me. They just totally ignored the email. And then I turned up to another event, just like coincidentally, where one of the press officers was at an event with Boris Johnson. And I said to them, can you explain to me this system, like how I'm meant to ask a question? And they didn't give me an answer. So I think there's like a weird kind of, I don't know, racket or cartel.
That happens in the UK too, though.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it does.
Well, it doesn't-
Good on you for asking.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I'm trying to. I can't even. They're not even allowing me to ask the question.
yeah,
And I'm like, well, I don't understand. Obviously, they don't like GB News. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
I have reached a point in recent years where if people don't give me a reason why something can't be done, like I will just keep going.
Yeah.
Even something as small as when we were in Bath and that guy said that we couldn't sit on the end of someone else's table. I was just like, why? And he's like, because we just don't do that here.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Why?
And
Make a racket.
eventually you tend to get your own way. So
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
always.
all of that stuff it doesn't really do much good in the light of the last week, where people that were never conspiracy theorists are saying this isn't right, it's a food for the conspiracy theorists.
do you mean the Trump?
Yeah.
Assassination.
Attempt.
Yeah. Well, it was an attempted assassination.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of whether there's a conspiracy or not, if you have any kind of assassination attempt or a successful assassination of a US president or former US president, there's going to be conspiracy theories, whatever happens, even if it's the most obvious, like this was just a random person. Everyone's going to be skeptical, rightly, of the so-called official narrative. And I think the Republicans in the Senate are currently investigating like what happened. And most people are asking, legitimate questions like, why didn't the Secret Service secure that rooftop that was like 150 yards away? And when they found out about this shooter on the rooftop, apparently they found out maybe 20 minutes beforehand. Why didn't they do anything about it? So people were pointing it out to the local police and to the Secret Service, and this guy crawling on a rooftop with a rifle, and they didn't do anything about it until the shots were already fired. And so I can understand why that would fuel conspiracy theorists. Do I think that the Secret Service were actively trying to kill Trump? Maybe I'm too naive, or maybe I'm too accepting of the official narrative. I think that's unlikely. But
Because it wasn't just Trump. There was a man killed and
Yeah.
2 others injured.
absolutely, it was a tragic event. And I think, part of the story as well is this idea of sort of DEI and how that impacted the, the Secret Service, because you had these videos, or this video of this sort of, I don't want to be mean, but kind of overweight lady trying to holster her gun, and she couldn't do it. And you're just like,
No.
why is this person in the Secret Service?
Yeah.
And this person meant to be protecting Donald Trump. And then there's another picture. And again, it's kind of like, maybe if the kind of, if I'm being really fair to them or giving them the benefit of the doubt, maybe this picture isn't reflective of their actions, but it's a photograph, it's out there, people have been talking about it. There's a picture of Trump just after the shots kind of ring out. And he's surrounded by these big male Secret Service security guards who kind of bring him to the ground. That's what you're meant to do. And then you're meant to sort of act as a human shield to make sure that he doesn't get killed. But then the woman security or Secret Service agent, she's about a couple of meters, maybe a meter away from the rest of them. And she's cowering like this as the bullets are flying. People were saying, I mean, they're joking about it, like this distance is the reason for the wage gap, I don't know, maybe that's being glib or something, because women can be brave, of course. But I think in this instance, the people who should be protecting someone as important as Donald Trump should be the most physically masculine,
the people
fit.
that are biologically stronger.
Absolutely. And the people who are at least tall as well. I mean, if you have short people surrounding him as a human shield, Trump's a tall guy. Yeah, and people who are fit and people who understand how to use their guns, or at least like how to holster their guns. I mean, this woman couldn't even do that. So
well, it's horses for courses, isn't it? The job description has to be matched in that specific circumstance. And
I mean, how would you guys feel about protecting Trump? Would you do it?
I would do it.
I would do it.
But do you think it'd be any good at it?
But I would rather a man do it. So, Stephen, I met Amy at NatCon. You met Amy at NatCon. I met you at NatCon in London. How do the Republican conventions and conferences compare to the kind of thing like NatCon London held in a church in Westminster?
Well, NatCon is an international
This is true.
event, so they hold it all across the world. And they held a NatCon recently in Washington, D.C.,
I was meant to be there. I missed it.
It's pretty interesting. How does it compare to the RNC and other Republican events? Well, the one in London was pretty small scale, to be honest, compared to the even the one in DC, and it was fairly conservative. Not talking about the ideology, but just in terms of the venue and everything. And I mean, it was a great, interesting conference. I thought, it was really well done.
When I say NatCon, I was using that as one example because we met there. But things like...
But you mean in the UK?
Yeah, UK conservative events.
Yeah.
Compared to
Republican
ones.
I mean, the scale is smaller. The speakers are far less radical or woke. You could describe them as. The context in America is, you have people who are devoted to Donald Trump, who are just, I went to a Turning Point USA rally recently in Detroit. People were telling me that they'd never been. Most people I'd asked had never been to any kind of political rally in their lives, which I was really surprised at, because you would have thought that most people going to these things would be like die-hard like political people. Yeah. But most of them hadn't, and a lot of them had travelled from all over the states. President Trump was speaking there, and it seems like Trump really has a huge, hardcore fan base, who are like politically driven, who just love this man and would do anything. Who
never were originally.
No, not necessarily. And whereas in the UK, because we don't have any Trump-like figures, I mean, you could say Nigel maybe he brings in crowds, and you saw that in
Boris
the election.
Used
to an extent, Boris did, and I think Boris is pretty charismatic, but nothing is on the scale of Trump. And I think that's the difference. It's both like the scale of everything, and there's a lot more money in US politics than in Britain. Like, it's just a complete
no one
different
was
degree.
Hats saying Boris 2019.
No, I mean I'm sure the Tories handed them out. But then it's the ideological thing as well. Like, in the US, people are far more interested in topics like mass deportations. Like, that's a huge thing in the US right now.
Well, the top 3 things that people vote on, number 1 is abortion, number 2 is the economy, and number 3 is immigration.
And 2 of those things are sort of Republican like talking points.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the those conferences, the kind of political atmosphere in the States is far more radical, far more exciting, and more optimistic. Whereas that's not to say that they're not like painting a dystopian kind of picture. They are, But I think they recognise that the Conservatives in the US have or national populists, I should say, have a much better opportunity at gaining power or defeating their enemies than in the UK, where there basically is no hope. I mean, that's just my view. Maybe there's a tiny bit of hope. I'm not full like Peter Hitchens, but I think the UK political situation is pretty depressing at the moment.
Yeah, but we've got a bit of sort of the NatCon side of things opening up, and creatures like Liz Truss crawling into those. So, do you think there is a role for people like Liz Truss to be playing that have crawled sort of?
Well, she's gone off to the RNC now. She's in America.
Yeah, no,
It was a picture of her shaking hands with JD Vance.
That doesn't surprise me at all. So she's kind of crawling out of the elite.
She's crawling around in
She's
your
doing a
life.
lot of crawling. Yeah.
She is.
She's get up.
She's a creature.
Is there a role for Liz
crawling
Truss?
around.
Well, I feel like I'm not going to call her a creature, and I feel like I can.
Well, you know her.
Well, I can be more honest about. Well, not more honest, but I can say my view on her.
Yes.
Probably now that I've interviewed her, and I'm almost certain she wouldn't do another interview, so I can sort of say my mind. I think Liz Truss is a libertarian. I think she's interested in economic policy, in taxation, in a smaller state, and I agree with some of those things. I think where she's not as engaged is on the issue of immigration, which I think is the most important issue facing Britain and other Western nations. And on the cultural side of things, kind of cultural wars, trans, race issues and so on, she's a very late converter if she believes in it at all.
She's scratching around.
Well, I think,
Sorry,
you're loving this analogy. I've never thought so much of her as a kind of bug or something, but I'm sure Emily Maitlis would agree with your analysis of Liz Truss. I don't want to be too harsh on her, but I think, people... Here's what I say. I'm going to do a bit of self-promotion.
Yeah.
Go on.
and watch the interview that I did with Liz Truss.
I think we've already promoted it on here.
Well, then
really
people
good.
can make their mind
It's
up about
unbelievable.
Liz Truss.
Yeah.
I quote it quite often. Who's your favourite Conservative Party leader?
No.
Well, I asked her,
Javier Milei.
well, Javier, I said, who's your favourite Tory leader other than Thatcher and Churchill? And she said Javier Milei, which is quite a surprising answer.
Yeah.
And in the interview, I was just like, this is such an odd response. I could tell, if I'm being totally honest, I sort of wanted to do that interview for a long time. And I was asking her team for an interview for a while. And because, I know about Liz Truss, I've reported on Liz Truss, I know, her background, and I think when you hold politicians to account from a more conservative perspective, it's good to bring up things like, why did you say you're an LGBT ally, for example? And they're never going to be asked this in any other interview. So, I think she was quite shocked that she was asked those questions. And I don't think I was trapping her in any way, but I think that she's just so used to being attacked from the left. She's that's like almost like a kind of comfort zone for her. Yeah. But no one has ever criticised her from the right. And I tried to do something similar with Suella Braverman recently. And it's interesting, you kind of get these figures who the media think are some kind of Nazi far-right crazy people, like Suella or Liz. I mean, they literally paint Liz as some kind of like radical right-wing loon, basically. And I'm not saying that Liz didn't make mistakes. I think she made mistakes, like, for example, announcing a huge energy subsidy, which she couldn't afford, and not announcing spending cuts while she's cutting taxes. But she's not a right-wing loon.
No,
I mean, she's pretty centrist. I mean, I think maybe on the left, but that's just my view.
Yeah, the thing is, I actually don't have anything against her. I don't feel that strongly.
Sounds like you do.
I don't feel that strongly against her. Look, she didn't want to dance with me at a party. I really tried, and I'm sorry.
Was her dancing like bug-like?
I'm like, the way I feel about Liz Truss is the way Piers Morgan feels about Meghan Markle. It's the only way I can.
You've been rejected.
Was her dancing bug-like?
Bug-like. I can't remember because I didn't
get
to encounter. So, but she definitely is an extreme. My issue with her is that she's just a shapeshifter, and she's just so floppy.
Well, I think there's a lot of different analogies coming in. Maybe you're like mixing your metaphors or something.
Have you been? What's that? I only know the word in German about the man that wakes up as a bug.
The film, you mean? No. There's an old book,
Nietzsche.
isn't there? No, I've forgotten the book. Yeah.
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphosis.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've read that.
You're like Liz Truss has become a bug that's creeping and crawling, and now she's some kind of floppy
because she's-
shapeshifter.
Yeah, because my issue is with her. She's gone, oh, flipping hell.
Well, she
I've-
did the whole abolish the monarchy thing too as a teenager. As a teenager?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she was.
When she was a Lib Dem.
Yeah, she was young. She used to be a Lib Dem, and I mean, look, people can change their mind.
And now she's at the RNC.
Oh, yeah.
I don't mind that, but I
Yeah.
just think that I also think politicians should be authentic
Yeah.
to themselves, their true selves, and to say that you're some kind of for example, she now says she's anti-immigration, but only when she was prime minister she tried to increase immigration, and she says, oh, I said to her, I quoted various reports of her kind of cabinet clashes over this. She wanted to increase immigration, to have more visas to Indians, for example, and others like Suella were saying, no, that's not right. And I said to her in the interview, what about this report? Oh no, you can't believe everything you read in the press. But you didn't deny it and you didn't answer the question. And this is the thing, I think Liz was quite good at answering my questions, which maybe was the reason that she did badly in the interview overall. She was very direct, which I actually respect her for doing that. Not everyone just, like the interview I did with Suella more recently, she's more evasive than Liz, but probably gave better answers. But there was one question where, like, I was asking Liz about this incident where she was meeting, when she was foreign secretary, she was meeting with Sergei Lavrov, who's the Russian foreign minister. And they were in Russia, and this was before the invasion of Ukraine, and they were discussing, obviously, whether Putin's going to invade, and Liz was saying, no, Ukraine must have its sovereignty. And the Russians said to Liz, well, what about these regions? Do you think that Ukraine should have the sovereignty over these ones? And she said, no, Russia will never have sovereignty over these regions. And all those regions were in Russia. So they basically were tricking her, and she hadn't done her homework, and she didn't know what she was talking about. And at the time, no one denied that this happened. Like the British, normally what you'd get is either an official denial or an unofficial denial through sort of sources, Whitehall sources and so on, and newspapers would, dismiss it rightly as Russian propaganda, which they didn't do. No one denied it. So I said to Liz, what about this incident? And she said, no, you're spreading Russian propaganda. And I said to her, well, did it happen? Like, let's move the ad hominem to one side. Did this actually happen? I think I had to ask her 2 or 3 times before she denied that it had happened. And I think people can make up their own mind whether she's telling the truth in that instance or not.
Yeah.
You're doing amazing work.
It was a phenomenal interview.
We had a watch party. Okay, well, it was the Euro semi-final, and then we were all in the studio having some pizzas and stuff, and we thought we'd watch the Suella interview as a team afterwards, and we were just like cheering you on, like, yes, he's asking questions no one else is asking, and we just love to see it. Yeah, and it's quite strange, because when you went across, I thought, well, gosh, he's just going to be so caught up in American politics, and then the 2 things that I've enjoyed the most, at least, have been it's because I'm more invested, interviews with our politicians. But how's things going with the American election campaign? They've seem to have started earlier than usual, and also J.D. Vance now announced as Trump's vice president nominee.
Yeah.
Is that going to change things? Take it away.
Yeah, well, the US election campaigns are much, much longer than British ones.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a 6-week campaign, I think, for the general election, but their campaigns can go on for like 18 months.
Yeah.
Even 2 years.
I feel like the debates are earlier than usual.
Well, this year they were,
Yeah.
and that's because both candidates agreed to do early debates. And I think the reasoning for
Before they
Biden...
kicked the bucket.
Well, the thing is, for Biden, it was kind of like a bit of a test of him, right? Before the election campaign. And I think maybe it gave the Democrats an opportunity, which they haven't taken so far, to remove him as the candidate. And, there's even speculation that Biden might even step down as the candidate in the next few days because he's caught COVID. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, whether he's going to do it. But, that just shows you how badly or how, poorly he performed in those debates. So, and interestingly, from Trump's perspective, they want to do early debates because the kind of mail-in ballots, they come out quite early.
Yeah.
So if you do a late debate and Biden does very poorly, it might not actually impact the election result very much, because by that time millions of people may have voted, which is what happened in 2020. Where by the time of the first and second debates, a lot of people, millions, had already voted. So, whether that's, I think the issue of kind of mail-in voting, I don't know if that's very democratic. I think, voting on one day where it's kind of completely equal and fair, and when we all know, the election date is probably a fair way of doing it. And obviously the mail-in stuff is open to abuse, as it is in the UK as well. But in terms of the overall picture of the US election campaign, look, it's about to get really, really intense. We've just had the RNC. It's ongoing right now.
Today's the last day, isn't it?
I believe so, or maybe tomorrow, I can't remember. And then you have the DNC as well, which is coming up in August, which is in Chicago. So that's where they're going to officially nominate whoever their candidate's going to be, presumably Biden at this point, but maybe he'll step down beforehand. They have very limited time to do that. So I think it's actually quite an interesting campaign compared to, let's say, 2020. 2016 was pretty interesting as well. And I think, all of the events the last week have just turned everything into overdrive. And it's great for me as a journalist, because I get to, interview lots of people and cover these events in a really interesting way, rather than just sleeping in a basement and, not seeing any rallies or anything like that.
Now, I've been quite consumed with quite enough of British politics, thank you very much, but haven't had a chance to really dig into Trump's campaign and the American election. So for anyone else who is in the same boat as me, what are Trump's main selling points from his point of view? What's he kind of stating that as his key things?
Well, Trump over the last few weeks has been fairly quiet. And I think basically he's allowing the Democrats to kind of tear themselves apart, to eat each other after this terrible debate performance. And he seems like a changed man in some ways. Like, he's campaigning more strategically. I think it helps him that he doesn't have Twitter. He's got his own social media platform, which no one really uses, but other than his own supporters. But it seems like he's making fewer mistakes than he made in 2020. I forget who said it, some old cliched thing, sort of don't interrupt your enemies when they're making mistakes, and he seems to be doing that fairly well. In terms of the campaign talking points that he's hammering home, immigration, you mentioned earlier, that's the number one issue. We're talking about mass deportations. Millions of people have come into the US illegally under Biden. The southern border has been totally open. And
every American I meet, when I was in Italy, my mum just gets talking politics to strangers, and I'm just like, what if they don't agree with you? But they were all like, and these were people who said lifelong Democrat, and they're like, our city is ruined by immigration, and now they are like Trump all the way. So yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, well, I think the issue of immigration is massive, as it is in the UK. But people really see this stuff. They see the crime going up. They see
affects their life.
It affects their life. And they see the stories of people who've been murdered by illegal immigrants, and they think, why are these people here? And who takes the responsibility for these people being here? And I think many people point to Biden and his weak border policies. So that's number one. And the economy is another one. Inflation has gone up in the US under Biden, just generally. More recently, it's kind of declined a little bit, but people still feel they're kind of pinched in their pocket. And I think that, basically it's the economy and immigration are the two major things that Trump's talking about. Abortion is what the Democrats are talking about. And they're saying, they're criticising J.D. Vance, you mentioned, who's kind of Trump's vice presidential candidacy kind of nominee. He's very socially conservative. He supports banning abortion, and the Democrats view this as an issue where they can win. And
it's a little more nuanced than that.
You explain it, because maybe I'm simplifying his stance.
He's quite complicated. This is why I've been looking into it so much, and that's why I know. He personally is a 100% pro-life, believes in life from conception, and he is aware and agrees with Trump that this will not win elections. People want access to abortion when it's a case of rape or incest or the mother's life is at risk. So him and Trump think that a blanket limit of 15 weeks for all states, and then individual states can make their own decisions on it, because he's very much believes that every state should decide for themselves. So I think it's kind of a middle ground.
That's what he says. I mean, certainly his conviction, as you say, is as a pro-life Republican, and I think the Democrats are trying to use that as a kind of way of saying, oh no, he supports a federal abortion ban, which, as you say, he doesn't, and Trump doesn't either. And Trump's been fairly, liberal on the issue of abortion in the past. And I think
they believe in the will of the people.
Yeah, they think it's up to the states, and I think that was the Roe versus Wade decision was, allowing the states to make that decision, whereas before, it was kind of allowed across the country, and the states weren't able to make that decision. So I think the Democrats are really going to try and push on that issue. And by the way, don't underestimate how important that issue is for Americans. As you said, it's the number one issue. So
it is number one.
In the 2022 midterm elections, the Republicans really probably lost out because of this issue of abortion, and it just seems to drive particularly women absolutely crazy, and they they want to
the evangelicals, right?
Well, on the evangelical side of things, obviously they're very pro-life, but what I'm talking about mostly is kind of the women who support the Democrats,
right? Yeah, my body, my choice,
right? Exactly, the kind of so-called pro-choice people. That's a huge motivating factor for them. And they view it as like an attack on their what they call reproductive rights. Yeah. That's the kind of language they use.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this story, that the US Army had. I won't get this perfect because I just glanced over it. They were teaching about terrorist groups, and said that pro-life groups are terrorist groups, and then this got found out and they got in a lot of trouble over it, because they said that even if you had a bumper sticker saying that you're pro-life, that's a person that you should investigate. So crazy. It's such a it's bizarre to me how much of an issue it is over there when it's not brought up in UK politics.
Well, that's because you have conservatives in America who are more religious and Christian, frankly. So and
we don't have many religious.
Well, Britain's more secular, and the Conservative Party is far more liberal. So in the UK, so of course it's not going to be an issue. And if you raise the issue in the UK, you're kind of shouted down, silenced pretty quickly. I think the more socially conservative MPs at the last election, a lot of them have lost their seats. So I think it's going to be probably a more kind of worse situation under Labour. Than it even was under the Conservatives. And I think we've got a pretty extreme set of laws in the UK. I mean,
most extreme in Europe.
Right. So Europe, it's 15 weeks, right, for most places. Is that right? I don't know. And here was 24 weeks?
24, even though babies survive outside the womb at 22.
Well, in Canada, there's no limit.
I know.
And, maybe Britain will see that soon. I don't know.
Well,
but certainly,
has her way.
It's impacting the US election we wouldn't understand it even being an issue in the UK.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The work that you've done on the diversity DEI stuff in Britain, have you seen anything come of your work on that?
No, it's all been wasted. It's all been a complete waste of time, basically.
Well, we saw this...
I'll continue. Basically, not much has happened. The Tories at the time, when they were in power, didn't do anything about it. Even when I pointed it out repeatedly, sometimes they might say, "Oh, we're going to launch a review into X, Y, Z." And nothing ever happens. It's just this thing to say to the media, basically. I think one time they claimed, I'm trying to remember what it was. One time in the Navy, there was like official Navy poster or kind of leaflet or something, and it said, you need to use your pronouns and you need to do whatever it is. And they said they removed that. I mean, I got an email. This almost never happens. They sent me an email immediately, basically saying this is outrageous. We are going to remove this immediately. Which is, what obviously I hope that they're going to say that every time, but that's only happened one time out of dozens of stories that I've done. So has it had any impact? It's quite depressing when I say it hasn't really changed anything, but. Okay, what has it changed? Maybe internally, civil servants feel more
held to account,
or more kind of concerned or worried about pushing DEI when they think there's going to be pushback in the press. And I think that is a cultural change. Some of the civil servants I know say, like, for example, in the Home Office, I used to do loads and loads of stuff about the Home Office, and I'm sure I still will continue to do that. I know a few people who work there. But one of them was like, yeah, after your reports, the stuff that the DEI training suddenly became very boring. And boring means code for impartial / neutral / not full of BLM stuff. So, you know, it can have an impact, like quiet impact. But in terms of like headlines of, you know, the Tories scrap this or this course is removed or whatever, not much has changed. So maybe I should just give up. I don't know.
Well, we've got a new government now.
And we saw for the first time today Carla Denyer, leader of the Green Party. Co-leader? Or leader? Lib Dems have co-leaders, right?
I think the Greens had a co-leader recently, but maybe they just have one leader now.
Right. Well, Carla Denyer, she's the MP for Bristol as well. Started her speech by saying, "I'm Carla Denyer and my pronouns are she, her," which apparently is a Commons first.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. I'm surprised Nigel didn't do that.
That would be funny.
Well, it's all pretty depressing, isn't it? But I think, look, yes, Labour did very well, and I know you're sick of talking about UK politics, but we're back to it already. I think the Tories. My point to everyone is, you know, the Tories were doing this stuff for 14 years, and some of them said that it was wrong, and made speeches, but they didn't do anything to reverse it. Whereas what the Labour will be like is they'll be more explicit. They'll say the pronoun stuff. They'll talk about the Trans Day of Visibility. Look at what Biden's done to the White House. Look at what Trudeau's done in Canada. And they'll probably be more kind of open and overt about their support for this stuff than the Tories were, because the Tories understood, some of them, that their base absolutely hated this, so they couldn't, you know, openly say that they supported it. But privately they did, and they pushed it, you know, in public. They pushed it through policy. That is, they pushed wokeism through policy. Except on some things like sort of banning puberty blockers and Tavistock and so on, where, you know, fair to the Conservatives, they did good things. And fair to the Labour, they're not, in some ways, that, you know, I think Wes Streeting said recently that they are going to continue with the ban on puberty blockers. Maybe there's some nuance about that. Maybe we should be concerned in some way. I haven't looked at the detail of it. But, you know, so there's been some wins, but it's basically been a disaster.
So from the DEI stuff in the UK, is it the same or worse or better in America?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in America, a lot of this stuff
it is DEI there, and it's
EDI here. Yeah, but I think DEI is probably a better phrase. But
is theirs equity? Or is ours equity?
I think they can kind of flip. I think both of them are equity, from my understanding. I should know that because I read hundreds of these documents. They don't. Listen, it's all the same thing. But in the US, there's a bit more of a pushback against it, and private companies and some institutions like Harvard, or maybe not Harvard, maybe I'm getting that wrong. MIT, I think, have started to remove their DEI pledges and courses. So it's interesting that there has been some conservative victories in the States, particularly among private institutions and universities, like I said, whereas the federal government obviously is run by Joe Biden, so they can't really make an impact there. On the state level, people like Ron DeSantis have been destroying DEI kind of root and stem in Florida. So the way that the country works in the States, it's far easier to destroy DEI if you have the governor who's able to kind of pass legislation in their local state legislatures. I'm not going to say parliaments, but where they're able to do that. And as I said, there has been some wins, where in the UK, everything's centralised. And it can happen in local councils, but I guess it's not much of an issue, for Conservative councillors when they're thinking about tax cuts or bins or something rather than DEI.
Yeah.
Well, before I actually suffocate, it's so hot in here.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's no windows?
No, that was a bad joke. Because we're all very hot people.
Oh yeah, that's so true. That is so true.
Are we gonna? So what's that? Is that before it's hot?
Well, before we suffocate, we should wrap up.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute pleasure having you back. Our first repeat guest on Bombshells.
Yeah.
Well, I'm honoured.
We're honoured.
Have you noticed an improvement?
I mean, the studio's great.
Yeah.
You guys, were excellent.
You guys okay.
I think the questions were good. You asked some good. You had some questions prepared this time.
Growth.
Last time you had a few questions as well, but I think it was maybe a bit more of a
Conversation.
chaotic start. Maybe
Yeah.
is that me being rude? I don't know. I think
Okay.
I was impressed by your grilling. I was expecting tougher questions, so thank you for asking easy ones.
It's just nice to have a catch up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's been lovely having you back in the UK as well, having a bit of a catch up, and we will miss you when you go back.
What? Tell us if you can a project that you're going to get started on when you go back.
Well, we're doing a film about immigration, so I can tell you that.
Ooh.
Oh, that's a surprise.
Yeah, we'll do another watch party for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Right.
I did a film about Muslims already, so you can go and watch that.
There we go.
I was interviewing imams, and that was one of the most difficult films I've ever done.
Wow.
But maybe that's for the third episode. We
Yes.
can talk about it before
Yes.
before we suffocate.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steven, for coming from America just for us. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.